Okay, welcome back to the Azure Education Governance Series. We are now on video 4, where we're going to talk about Azure portals and the Contoso hierarchy. My name is Eric DeBoard. I'm an Azure TSP at Microsoft, and I'm joined by Amy Manley and David Uoa, who are also Azure TSPs at Microsoft, and we all focus on education. Okay, so just a quick review of Contoso's current state. We've been following along with Contoso, our fictitious company, through this video series, and we will continue through the rest of the series. They have purchased an Azure monetary commit. They have identified 2 leaders from their IT department, Amy and David, who will govern their overall Azure deployments, also known as enterprise admins. They have learned about the enterprise enrollment hierarchy. They learned in our last video, and now they're ready to define their own hierarchy. Before we get to those decisions, though, we want to talk about the Azure portals that are associated with creating the hierarchy and deploying resources. And so that is known as the enterprise portal. And what we're showing here is a picture of what the enterprise portal looks like. And so you can see here there's little depictions of what you're looking at across the top, the sides, and the bottom. And we're also going to get into a demo with this. So just a few things to point out on this slide. There's going to be some, and these are not obvious sometimes when you're logging into the portal, but there's a number of options here that have these little blue pins. That means that there's something there that can be edited. A lot of what you're looking at is something that you're just reading, but those items can be edited. There's the panel across the left where you can sort of navigate through the portal. And there's panels across the top or tabs where you can go into different areas like departments, accounts, and subscriptions. But let's go ahead and take a look at the actual portal as a demo, and we'll see what it really looks like. Okay, so I'm logged in here into a demo portal, and this is what you would be seeing when you first logged in. And it's showing an enrollment list. Now, we mentioned that most customers only have a single enrollment. However, if you had multiple enrollments, you would see several of them. Now, this isn't a pretty name, but the way I want to get started right away here is I'm going to click on my enrollment. Okay, and we'll just assume that that is the Contoso Education enrollment.
Hey, Erica,
yes.
while that loads, just to clarify, this to log into this portal is from the email that was mentioned in the previous video that the enrollment or billing contact received, correct?
Yes, exactly. Good point. And we're in our scenario, we're going to assume this is David or Amy. So one of you have logged into the enterprise portal for Contoso. And this is what you're going to see. So if you click on the enrollment, you're going to see a number of things here. Most of this is informational. But as you move down the list here, you can see that blue pen I was referring to. This is referring to authentication level. How do you let users in your organization authenticate to the enterprise portal? Do you use Microsoft accounts? So this would be like a Live account or an Outlook account or a Hotmail account. Do you use work or school accounts only? This would be Azure AD accounts that, for example, come from Office 365, Azure AD accounts. You could also have cross-tenants where you're sourcing from several different ADs. Or you could have mixed, where it could be any of the above. Okay, so we're going to leave this as it is. You can also see the start and end date of your enrollment. So if you had an enrollment that started, mid-year or what have you, you'll see that there. You can see this is an active enrollment. But just to skip some of this and get to more of the specifics, this Azure Marketplace item here, this is if you want your users to be able to deploy solutions out of the marketplace. We'll talk about the marketplace a little bit more later when we do the management portal and we get deeper into the series. But this would be things like an appliance, a networking appliance out of the marketplace. You can either turn those on or off. So in this case, it's enabled, so users can deploy marketplace items. The next one is department admin view charges. So you can, as an enterprise admin, you can say whether or not you want department admins to be able to see charges that they are rolling up from their subscriptions. The same for account owners. Do you want account owners to see their charges? These can be all enabled or turned off. At some point we'll also talk about reserved instances. These are basically reservations you make of VMs for lower prices. You can enable those or turn those off. And the reason you might do that is because when you make a reservation, it actually takes the money out of your account right away. So you can disable that. Now over here on the right side of the screen, you can see all the different enterprise admins that have been added to this enrollment. So in the case of Contoso, we said there were two, David and Amy. And so those would be the two accounts we would see here. And you have a link here to add additional administrators, so you can go through the process of adding additional administrators, whether it's a Microsoft account or Work School account, fill out the details, and add those. And that's sort of, how you manage from an enterprise admin perspective. That's what an enterprise admin manages. Now, if we go, yes, go ahead, David.
Hey, Eric. Before we scroll over to department, just a couple of questions that we get from education customers. One is around the Azure Marketplace. What we typically see is just customers leave that enabled, right? But if there ever is a business need to keep it disabled, and then they ask us, hey, how do I then go back and create a virtual appliance for one of our partner solutions? Then one of the ways that you can do is if you have it disabled, when you need to deploy an appliance, go ahead, log in here, enable it, deploy the appliance, and then come back and disable that feature again. And then for enterprise administrators, again, kind of following best practice, and the onboarding team can go much more into detail. But when you click Add Administrator, and as Eric mentioned, if you are synchronizing your identities, recommendation is not to use a Microsoft account, but use a Work School account. That way, if you're, let's say, wherever that administrator leaves the institution, then part of your identity process will go ahead and definitely disable that account because it's tied to your Azure Active Directory.
Good point. Good point. And and that's a common question we get. I have customers all the time that say they can't deploy something from the marketplace. Well, those people who are deploying resources don't realize that the enterprise admin didn't turn it off, or didn't turn it on, or turned it off. So that happens a lot. Just know that that is an option in the enterprise portal. Good point. Now, as we go across the top here, you can see something that's what we talked about in a previous video. You can see your departments, your accounts, and your subscriptions. So if I click on department, this is where I could add departments. By clicking on the add department, give it a name. I could potentially give it a cost center and a spending quota. I know that spending quota would not be a hard limit. And then once I create the department, I can add administrators, so department admins. So again, this is optional. We're going to talk about Contoso, what their choices are a little bit later, but these are optional. If I click on account, this is where I can add my account owners. Okay, these are the people who actually can create subscriptions. And so if I click on subscription, these are the subscriptions that I have access to. Now, we mentioned it in a previous video. I'm an enterprise admin and I don't have any subscriptions. I also don't have an add subscription button. So that's why we don't see that here, because I'm just an enterprise admin. All right, now if we go across the left side here, David, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Eric, again, just a common question that we get. If you click on department and you click the plus, I don't know if you'll be able to see the details of a particular department, but if not, we can click on the add department. One of the common questions that we get, oh, perfect, right there. One of the common questions we get is, okay, if again, we realize this is a soft quota. So you let's say you have a department, you assign X number of amount for your department. You'll notice there that you'll see an option to send notifications. So that's one of the ways that you can track how much you're spending for that department. So let's say you assign $10,000. You can get notifications when it's 50% of that spending quota, 75, 90%. So just keep that in mind as a way of tracking it. And then in other videos, we'll go over other services that you can leverage to track your usage.
Yeah, good point, because there are many ways to track costs. As we talked about earlier, departments is one of those. The overall enrollment is one of those, and then you can also buy subscription. So good point. Now I'm just going to quickly move across the left here. We're on the Managed tab here. We also have reports that we could run, and so I don't have that in my demo environment, but you'll see if you had this, you'd be able to run some reports. There's a notification area here that you're going to see any notifications that are showing up. So occasionally you'll see something show up here, like we're going to tell you about reserved instances in this case. And then this help section is very useful. There's all sorts of different options here. So for example, if you want to create a new subscription, it's going to tell you step by step what this means, what it looks like, those sorts of things. So the help section is really important. Okay, so let's go back to our slide deck. We'll move on. Now, I'm not logged in as an account admin, so we just wanted to quickly show you what an account admin would see that's a little bit different. And so we are basically on the subscription tab. If you remember just a few minutes ago, when I was on the subscription tab as an enterprise admin, I could see nothing here. But as an account admin, I can see the different subscriptions that I've created, and I can add additional subscriptions. Okay, so that's pretty important. And when you add subscriptions, you're going to see something that looks like this. It's going to spin up another web page where you will provide a first name, last name, a contact email, and then go through the process of signing up for the subscription. Okay, then when you go through that process, you're going to get at least a couple of options here. The first one here, pretty important. This is an enterprise dev test subscription. Our education customers can spin these up. What this is it's a special type of subscription that gives you discounted rates and also gives you additional images. Just think of it as your MSDN type scenario. Now, you wouldn't want to put production workloads in here because the rates are lower, those sorts of things. But just think of it as an MSDN subscription style subscription. Then you also have just the regular Microsoft Azure Enterprise type subscription. This is where most of your subscriptions, that's how it will be created. Okay. All right. Now, we mentioned this in a previous video, but we're going to bring it back up again. Once you have your monetary commit and your enrollment set up, you're probably going to want to, and we recommend that you set up an onboarding call so that you can go through the process with a Microsoft resource to go through this entire setup of the portal, understand the options we just checked, turned on and off. If you already have an enrollment and you never did this and you've already been using Azure, you can still set up this onboarding call. So there's the link to do it, and then you can see the problem type that you're going to select and the category. So definitely recommend that. Okay, we're also going to quickly do a demo of the management portal. Now, remember, the enterprise portal is all about governance. The management portal is more about deploying resources. So I am an account owner, or I am a resource that's been given access to a subscription. This is the place where you actually deploy resources that create charges, virtual machines, storage accounts, all those sorts of things. Just a real quick demo of this. Over here on the right, you can see I'm logged in as myself. We have icons across the top here that give you additional information if you want to give feedback, if you want to open a support ticket, and we'll get into more details about that later on. Some standard settings for the portal, what color scheme it's going to use, if you're going to have high contrast, those sorts of things. This is the notifications area. When you deploy resources, you'll get a notification that they are in the process of deploying or they have completed. Here we can choose what subscriptions we want to look at. I happen to have access to a number of subscriptions. I can choose which ones I want to actually see at this point, and I can change that around. We also have a cloud shell, so if you click this, you can launch a shell where you can actually use CLI or PowerShell to manage your subscription. As we move across the top here, and you can see it's going to default to Bash, but I'm going to close out of this. We're not going to do a demo of that right away. On the left here, I can see all the different options to view my services or create new services. This big create button here, this is how I create a new resource. You can use categories to find these, or you can do a search. If I wanted to deploy a firewall, for example, I could do a search for a firewall and I can get a list of a ton of different options. Now these would be known as marketplace items, most of these. So when you see a third-party solution, that is from the marketplace. So if you turned off the marketplace items, you'll still see this, but you'll get an error when you try to deploy it. So just be aware of that.
Hey, Eric.
Yes.
So one of the common questions that we get is when somebody's logging in to the management portal, they sometimes think that just by creating a subscription here, they actually get billed. And again, just to clarify, you don't get billed when it's an empty subscription. You haven't deployed any resources until you start creating a resource like you're showing right here, where you select let's say a virtual machine. That's where you'll start provisioning and incurring cost. And there's other components of the Azure Resource Manager that don't incur any cost, but we can go into those at a later time.
Good point. Good point. Okay, so the other thing I want to mention here is all these different shortcuts you see here. These are all my favorites. And basically, if I click this All Services button at the top, these are all the services that are available to view in Azure, and you can see there's a ton of them, and most of them aren't checked. All the ones that I put a star next to are the ones that I see in my shortcut window. And you can think of these as views of specific things, like all the resources I have, or just my virtual machines. So if I click on virtual machines, I'm just going to see my virtual machines. If I click on networks, I'm just going to see my networks. And so these are just shortcut views. Now, one of the ones that I want to point out in this video, because it's kind of relevant, is this one I've favorited called subscriptions. If I click on this, I can actually see my subscriptions. And then because I'm an account owner, I can add additional subscriptions. So I can actually do that. So in this case, I'm not only the person who has access to this, the subscription as account admin, I can create new ones. So I just wanted to point that out. That's because I'm an account owner in the hierarchy, the enrollment hierarchy. Okay, the final thing I'll point out here is this dashboard area. This is where you can pin things that you want to see, like the service health of Azure overall, your resources. You could have telemetry items here, like the performance of your VMs, the processor. You can create many different dashboards. Okay, so I could create a new dashboard, and that could be dedicated to another application. And so just want to point that out as well. It's a great way to sort of get a quick view of what's happening in your environment. Okay, so that's the management portal. Okay, so let's jump and talk about what Contoso's decided to do. We talked about a lot of things. Here's some of the decision criteria that Contoso is using to determine its enterprise enrollment hierarchy. They have a medical research group that wants autonomy to manage their own environment. Okay, they have central IT, and central IT will be managing the functions of most IT departments across the organization. All right, now again, it's very important to mention this because we don't want you to get into that analysis paralysis scenario. Requirements and requests are going to change over time. Most organizations start with a very simple configuration, and you know what? That typically works for a long time. So don't be afraid to get started. We're going to give you some examples of what Contoso is going to do with these decision criteria, but just try to avoid trying to make it perfect, because it's never going to be perfect, because it's going to change as your organization changes, and it's also going to change as Azure changes. Okay, so Contoso's decisions that they've made as a result of their knowledge now of the enterprise enrollment hierarchy and the different types of roles. They're going to create two departments. We mentioned they had a medical research department that wanted autonomy. That's the key word. So the medical research department is going to be created in the hierarchy, and Brian is going to be the department administrator for that hierarchy. Central IT department is going to have a department as well, and Eric is going to be the lead for that department, or the department administrator. In addition to this, Contoso has identified account owners. So for the research department, Brian is not only going to be the department administrator, he's also going to be the account owner to deploy subscriptions. Okay, so that's very possible. We want to point that out. For central IT, a single account owner, Monica, has been identified at this time. Monica at Contoso has historically been responsible for IT budgets and technical teams, so it made sense to make her a department admin over central IT. Again, note, additional account owners may be named in the future. Okay, so we wanted to point out what this all looks like and kind of bring it together. So for the enterprise enrollment of Contoso Education, they've decided on two departments, a medical research department and a central IT department. just draw this all out here really quick. So David and Amy, as we mentioned earlier, they are the enterprise admins for the enrollment. So they have the ability to manage and create department admins and sort of govern the whole hierarchy, turn on marketplace items, turn off marketplace items, those sorts of things. Brian is going to be a department admin, but Brian is also going to be an account admin. We want to point that out. That can be the same person. Over on the right, Eric is going to be the central IT department administrator. Monica is going to be the account owner, and she's going to have potentially multiple subscriptions, and we'll talk about subscriptions a little bit later. So this is the hierarchy that Contoso has landed on at this time.
And Eric, just to clarify again, just to reiterate, the folks that will have the ability to create the Azure subscriptions are going to be Brian and Monica, because Brian, the department admins were able to create those account owners. So just keep that in mind. The account owners are the ones that have the rights to create those subscriptions down below.
Yeah, and in addition to that, good point, David, those subscriptions can have a whole different set of users that can actually deploy resources. Brian and Monica just happen to be the account owners. And so they will be able to assign different resources, different users to subscriptions that have access to subscriptions.
Yep, and we'll go into those details in later videos of now that you have a subscription and you want to grant other folks access, be it administrators, contributors, maybe just reader roles, then Brian and Monica will be able to delegate those roles, and we'll go over that more in detail.
All right, so where are we for next steps for Contoso? The structure will be set up in the enterprise portal, so the structure we just talked about. And then in the next steps, we're going to talk a lot more about subscriptions. And the next steps will be that IT team members will be defined that will be able to actually be assigned to manage Azure subscriptions and resources, or better said, to be able to deploy resources in those subscriptions. So that's it for this video. Thanks for joining, and we will be moving on to Azure subscription management in the next video.